But let's also find out then what the outlook is when it comes to the budget. Are we going to see that continuum towards Viksit Bharat, which are going to be the sectors that will be in the spotlight? Joining in, we've got with us Mr. Keki Mistry. He's the former VC and CEO HDFC and independent director in multiple companies. Mr. Mistry, thank you so much for joining in. Clearly, it seems like infrastructure, defense, affordable housing, it's all of these themes that have been the focal point of the government. Will they continue to remain in the spotlight for the budget?
In my opinion, the budget will revolve around 6 pillars. The first pillar will be growth. Our economy has done extremely well despite all the turbulence that is prevalent in other parts of the world. And we've done extremely well because the government has been very focused on reforms, and RBI has done a tremendous job in terms of keeping inflation under control. So I think growth will continue to be one of the main parameters of the budget, or one of the main goals of the budget. The second goal of the budget, according to me, will be employment generation. And employment generation comes in a big way through, encouragement to industries like housing, affordable housing, infrastructure, and so on and so forth. If you look at housing, housing has a multiplier effect on the economy. There are something like close to 278 odd industries which are dependent on the housing sector for growth. And housing creates so many jobs, not just directly in terms of construction workers, masons, carpenters, plumbers, engineers, but also number of jobs in other ancillary industries. So the second pillar will be job creation. Third pillar, in my view, will be consumption, encouraging consumption. We have seen that consumption has come down a little bit in the current year, and steps could perhaps be made to increase consumption. How do you increase consumption? By putting more money in the hands of people. How do you put more money in the hands of people? Probably by looking at some change in the tax rates.
As someone like you on the board of 7 major companies, 5 of which are listed with a market cap of 30 trillion, how do you think momentum can be increased to focus on more areas and initiatives?
No, I think we've covered many initiatives. I think if you were to cover these 6 areas that I was talking about, I think the markets will be extremely happy. More and more jobs will get created. We will also see all-round growth from every segment of the society. And if we can see some pickup in consumption, then that would go a long way in creating demand. If demand was to increase, then manufacturers would need to produce more to satisfy that demand. And in order to produce more, they would need to create more and more jobs. So it then becomes a self-fulfilling kind of a proposition.
Believe that reduction in household savings and the rise in household debt burdens are causes for concern and economic stability, and can these issues be addressed?
Well, I think first of all, yes, it is true that household savings have declined a little bit and that household debt has gone up a little bit, but we must not take 1 year as a sort of an example of what is happening in the economy. If you look at 2022 with the onset of the Russia-Ukraine war, oil prices shot up globally. And because oil prices shot up, there was inflationary pressure that we in India also saw. And as I said earlier, RBI did a fantastic job in terms of bringing inflation under control. But nonetheless, some impact of inflation is still being felt by the common man. So on one side, you've seen food, while core inflation is down to 3.13%. Food inflation has been high. Food inflation is not very easy to control because it's dependent on so many factors where we don't necessarily have control. So as a result, that has resulted in savings coming down because a lot more has got, a lot less money is available for people to save in this situation. But going forward, I expect that to change. I would expect savings as a proportion of the household savings to increase, and I would expect the proportion of financial savings to household savings to also increase. So whilst overall household savings has come down a little bit, the proportion of financial savings to overall household savings has come down a lot more. I expect that to correct.
Right, and as you have also said that the cut in corporate tax has yielded positive results for the economy and for India, how do you think the government should now be approaching individual tax rates?
My experience over the years in not just seeing in India, but seeing in many other countries globally, is that when you reduce the tax rate, you automatically, one, improve compliance significantly, and two, you create that greater urge to work and earn more income. So reduction in tax rates, whether it is at different tax rates and also at the highest marginal tax rate, I think will go a long way in improving sentiment, increasing productivity, and at the end of the day, also resulting in higher savings and increase in consumption.
Economic cycle has been led by capital expenditure while consumption has lagged. How can the middle income population be targeted, and are there any measures which do you think they could boost consumption?
So as I said, consumption can go up if people have the the wherewithal, the financial savings to be able to spend more. And I think, as I said earlier, reduction in tax rates will automatically facilitate consumption. I think we need to understand that consumption is today what has happened is high-end consumption is very strong. Low-end, middle-level consumption has been relatively weak. So some measures which could be taken in the budget, which would improve the low-end, middle-level kind consumption. It could be a variety of ways to do it. It could be some reduction in GST rates at the lower end for some of the more products which are consumed by the common man. There are various ways in which could be done, but I expect something like that to happen.
Right. Keki, while luxury housing has been booming, affordable housing has still seen muted growth, right? And it's been the case in the last recent quarters. Do you expect any government support to boost this particular segment?
In my opinion, yes. I think the affordable housing segment will, in my opinion, get a boost because of one is obviously it helps the people, but equally importantly, it helps the economy because of the amount of jobs that will get created, not just in housing, but also in all the ancillary industries. But when you talk of high-end housing, you must remember one thing, that the period from 2016 to 2020, almost a 5-year period, saw a very muted growth, very low growth in the high-end housing. So what you've seen post the latter part of 2020, say for the last 3.5 or 4 odd years, to some extent is making up for the slowdown that you saw during that 2016 to 20 period.
All right, and do you foresee housing growth occurring primarily in big cities, or do you think that, Mr. Mistry, we'll see tier 2 and 3 cities as well contributing?
I think the demand for housing will come from all over the country. We are extremely low in terms of penetration of housing. The mortgage to GDP ratio in India is still around 11 odd percent, which is, forget the Western world where it's much, much higher. But even compared to some of the emerging markets, we are still very, very low. So I think demand will be there. Demand is there from all over the country, whether it's tier 1 cities, tier 2 cities, tier 3 cities. And I think the growth opportunity in the tier 2, tier 3 cities will be even higher in the years to come, because I think there may be some kind of incentive in the budget for the affordable housing segment.
Right. Kiki, do you think the interest rate cycle has peaked, and could a fall in interest rates then boost consumption? And how much of a rate cut do you anticipate this fiscal year?
See, I think it's very difficult for us to take a call on interest rates per se, because it is dependent on so many factors which are not entirely in our control. So while core inflation, as I said earlier, has come down to 3.13%, certain items of the product basket continue to be very sticky in terms of inflation, one of which is food inflation, which is what is impacting the common man. Now, food inflation is dependent on many factors, and some of these factors are not entirely in our control. How the monsoons play out and, things like that. Fortunately, from whatever we have seen in terms of data, monsoon outlook for the current year will be normal to above normal, which should clearly facilitate or clearly result in lower food prices. And that, to my mind, will be the trigger that the RBI would probably need to look at reducing interest rates. Now, what is the quantum of reduction they do? I think that is more a matter of how inflation numbers actually pan out. geopolitical factors, oil prices, and so on and so forth. My personal view is that the first rate cut you would see, personal view, will be in the October to December quarter, and then thereafter it is going to be so much dependent on what the data shows up.
So, as a chairman of HDFC Life, how significant the announcement of a composite license in insurance for the insurance sector could be? I mean, do you think this is something which could change the dynamics for the insurance sector?
I think that is a call HDFC Life will have to take whenever the rules come, whenever the rules are framed and the law is in place. I think composite license will be an option that would be available to a company to pursue if it so wishes. Obviously, it is something which will require very detailed deliberation in the board meeting. But I must compliment IRDA and, for that matter, all the financial service regulators in India, because they've taken so many initiatives in terms of creating an environment which makes business processes easier, and number two, facilitates growth. If you look at insurance in particular, IRDA has got massive plans in terms of making insurance possible for all Indians by 2047. So I think there are many measures which are around the corner, and I think all these measures taken together will result in a sharp increase in the quantum of insurance in India.
And recently, the regulator also highlighted the high volume and activities in the equity F&O segment. Do you think any measures will be taken to address these in the budget?
I think the SEBI chairperson has also mentioned something about the F&O market. I frankly don't have the expertise to talk too much about it. But yes, I do hear from market sources that the F&O activity has become a little worrisome. And I'm sure SEBI is on top of it and trying to find ways and means of making sure that the system is properly regulated and there is no undue no problem that we face.
Keki, great to have you on the show. Thank you so much for taking the time out and speaking with us today. Let me now welcome on board the...
If you like this video, then like, share and subscribe to ET Now.